Hello everyone and welcome to Sinful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the grey. So today's video, what I want to do is we're going to look at the state of the meta. I did a video a little while ago, and whether or not I was correct or incorrect, it was a ton of fun to sort of have some speculation on what was good and what wasn't in Age of Sigmar 3.0. And so now we're at that time where we're finally about to see the first two proper battle tomes, and we've seen at least one battle tome update, and we know another one is on the way. I thought it would be a great time to have a look at the state of the meta. Now, I want to say that I am definitely not the most competitive player, but I do like keeping up with all the stats, seeing all the tournament results from around the world, and sort of see what armies are doing well and what armies aren't. I don't think this is important even for someone in a more narrative mindset or a more casual play mindset, because it gives me an idea of what armies I can easily put on the table and have a good game with, or what armies maybe require a little bit more thought and sort of play to get the best out of them, or even just get a decent game out of them with. And so that's what I want to do in this video. We're just going to take a look at some basic sort of stats and talk about why some armies are doing so well at events and why some armies maybe aren't doing so well at events. But before we get started, I want to just say there's some really cool things to know. Now, first of all, if you want some really cool, just crunchy number stuff, you should go check out AOS Shorts. It's a fantastic website. You should definitely go check that out. It's got a bunch of fantastic stats on there for just number crunching. I will put a link in the description to AOS Shorts. And also, you should go check out the various different places, but AOS Shorts is where I go for all my tournament data info. It's a great place to go check stuff out. And you've got the Honest Wargamer as well, who does more in-depth talking and probably goes a lot more in-depth than what I will here, and has a really great understanding, as Rob from the Honest Wargamer really delves into tournaments, and it's what he is all about. Anyway, so what I want to do today is we're going to look into 5 armies that are doing really well and 5 armies that are not. The midfield, it doesn't sort of matter to me what the midfield is, because that means you can just sort of take that army and have good games, I think, in general. But maybe these more competitive armies, you want to know why they're doing so well, and maybe these uncompetitive armies at the moment, you want to know why they aren't doing so well. And so lastly as well, it's worth mentioning that in every army at the moment, in some grand tournament, which is a 5-game 2-day tournament somewhere in the world, every army has at least got one result of 4 wins. Every single army. So without further ado, what we're going to get into is we're going to look at the top armies first, and we'll look at why they are doing so well. Alrighty, and so number 1, probably the army that is tearing it up the most at the moment on the competitive scene is the Sons of Behemat. Now, Sons of Behemat are an interesting one because they've certainly definitely been playing in tournaments and getting a lot of really strong results of late. And so the main reasons for this are, first of all, they have a strong objective game. This might sound so simple because of how many models they count on objectives, but that is just it. Age of Sigmar is all about objectives, and Sons of Behemat just have such power on them. And when we're going to talk about the next few things in what they do really well, this just compounds the fact on how good they are on that objective game, just able to take points and hold. And of course, they hold because your opponent has to actually have built to deal with them. A lot of the Sons of Behemat abilities make them really tough and make them really hard to shift, and not to mention that objective-based game and the ability for them to also do some decent damage with a couple of little combos. See, putting a wizard hat and flaming weapon on one can make some really nasty damage, plus all the mortal wounds and the ability to pick out models out of units as well with their pick up and stuff in bag rules, etc. This just makes the Sons of Behemat really hard to play if you haven't built with them in mind. You need to, when you're going to an event, plan that you may run into Sons of Behemat, and you need to have the amount of damage to deal with those Mega Gargants and get them off the objectives quick so you can get scoring. And the last thing here that makes the Sons of Behemat really good is they've got strong saves. A lot of them are on 3-up bases, especially the heroes. And that hero part is incredibly important because it means in the shooting and combat phase, they can almost always make sure that they have that 2-up save. Not only that, but if you take particular tribes, like the Taker tribe, you're going to have additional artifacts, and you can get things like the new Amulet of Protection that's going to give you the 5-up ward save from the generic artifacts list as well, and you can take multiple artifacts when you do certain things as well. The ability to make a giant a wizard and get Mystic Shield, or the ability to do Finest Hours because they are heroes, can make them really, really tough to deal with. So number 2 for our armies that are doing really well in the meta is the Disciples of Tzeentch. So, why are the Disciples of Tzeentch doing so well? Well, quite a few things actually. First of all, they're just a good army. Everything about them is good. Although, unlike some other armies, they maybe have unit choices that aren't good, so you do require a little bit of knowledge about what to run. But once you start running those things, you will find your time easier. Now, however, the FAQ has slightly changed some things, so it'll be really interesting to see how this goes in the future. And the next time I do one of these videos, it'll be really interesting to see where Disciples of Tzeentch sort of fit. But for now, they have strong magic. They can do a lot of offense, they can do a lot of debuffing and buffing of their own units, all in this magic phase, with the ability not only to have good casters, but have a lot of casters on the table as well. Casting, of course, as well, also is how they work. They're summoning engines, so you can summon in based on doing this amount of casting. With magic like it is so powerful for them, it is their ability to project power that makes them really good as well. Because they have this long-range magic and the ability to deal mortal wounds in a phase where others don't, plus they also do have shooting, because let's not forget, things like Pink Horrors and Karak Acolytes and the Lord of Change and all that do have shooting, and they can put out quite a decent amount of it as well. This just gives them a good power projection ability across the table. Speaking of Pink Horrors, we've mentioned them a couple of times. They are a really solid unit. Even with the current change to them that we've seen in the most recent FAQ, I don't think this is going to change all too much on what Pink Horrors and Archaon here, both of which are super good units for Tzeentch, is going to change all that much. In Tzeentch, Archaon still is going to be -1 to hit because of his innate ability to be a demon, and this is going to help him be able to get the -1 to hit because he's going to have the Locus of Tzeentch rule on him. Pink Horrors did change up a little. There's some really technical stuff on what you need to do, and so I strongly suggest go having a read on the War Scroll and how it has changed. But they still are a great buy for the amount of wounds they get on the table, because let's not forget, there's still going to be 10 hot Pink Horrors, 20 Blue Horrors, and 20 Brimstones regardless. So it's still 50 wounds to have to work through. Even if they've lost that ward save they used to have, or they've lost a bunch of other abilities, they're still going to be really hard to put down. It's these two units that Tzeentch is really riding off more than anything, and the ability of some offensive power as well with other units like Flamers and just the magical potential of the army. The Tzeentch is just continuing to dominate in the meta. Next up, we have the Seraphon. Seraphon are one of those armies like the Disciples of Tzeentch that has been really at the top of the meta for quite some time now. And why is this? Well, first of all, once again, like Tzeentch, they have really good magic, both offensively and defensively, and also just the ability to buff their own units as well. They've got some good, solid casters in the Slan and Lord Croak, who is an absolute beast of a caster and one of the best wizards in the game. These just give them a solid foundation on which to work with. Another great thing that Seraphon have remained strong with is they have a good battle tome in general, and most of their units have decent scrolls, or at least decent allegiance abilities and base sort of rules and fundamentals within the book that allow them to keep playing at that same sort of level. They're able to take a hit to something and then shift on to something else because they've got good options. We've seen the change from maybe heaps of skinks on the table and playing in maybe some of the more Starborn lists and stuff like that, to seeing Thunder Lizard lists doing really well at events, taking advantage of all the monstrous rampages, the ability that you have some heroes on top of them as well, things like Carnosaur, Old Bloods, and also Skink Priests and Skink Chiefs on their different sort of mounts as well for the Stegodons. All of these are just really good. Add into the fact that the army has good shooting, whether that be from things like Skinks, or the ability of things like the Bastiladon and Stegodon to sort of do some of the double shooting shenanigans with the Bastiladons you can do inside Thunder Lizards. Seraphon just have a good battle tome, and that's why they do so well. They can just chop and change between different units and different builds, and it's really hard to build a bad list. A bad Seraphon list is probably still going to take you 2 and 3 or 3 and 2 in an event. This is if you're running the worst possible units in the book. You can probably still do really well with it, and there's like no surprise that a bad Seraphon list can probably score really high in an event as well. Next up, number 4, Lumineth Realm-Lords. So, Lumineth Realm-Lords are one of those armies that are a little bit harder to play. They don't allow for the mistakes that maybe some of the armies like Tzeentch and Seraphon do in the meta. And this is why they may be just a little bit further down than the others here. Lumineth Realm-Lords, if you play them badly, you will suffer. They do require some prior planning and use to make them really work. Now, that being said, Lumineth Realm-Lords, when you play them right, can be absolutely devastating. They can have really oppressive magic. Teclis has just the ability to auto-cast spells and not allow them to be dispelled. And some of the spells they have in there are just plain nasty. They've got, you know, all the basic sort of things like mortal wound damage, area effect spells, teleport and all that. But then they've also got things like the total eclipse that makes all your opponent have to spend 2 command points instead of 1 over their entire army. I mean, that's just brutal. They've also got fantastic shooting in a unit in the Sentinels, which are just an absolute devastating unit on the tabletop. Don't need line of sight, can do mortal wounds on 5s, put out a decent amount of attacks, and let's not forget, let's talk about mortal wounds as well. The army just puts out an absolute ton of them, and when it does so, like, it can do so from so many different sources. Even things like wardens in combat can just do so many mortal wounds when you play them offensively, even defensively as well. And so, added to this, you've got great movement. Thanks to the teleport and thanks to some of the Wind Temple stuff you get, things like the Hurricane Wind Riders, but especially those Spirit of the Winds that can do some really nasty shenanigans to really just make your opponent absolutely rage at them. Those foxes are rightly hated across the tables, across the world at the moment. That doesn't mean they're unfun to play. They can just be really frustrating to deal with. But it is all these things that make Lumineth Realm-Lords so great, because they are such a hard army to deal with. When they're played really well, they are one frustrating army that just stops you playing as much and makes them play better. And the last of our top 5 armies at the moment, Soulblight Gravelords. Now, what makes them great? Well, 2 things primarily. So, they've got mortal wound output across the army, whether this be from spells or be from things like the Zombie War Scroll. They can just dish out a ton of mortal wounds across the army that just really make for the army to be really hard to deal with, as it just compounds you with all these mortal wounds and just takes your stuff off. It's also got great attrition play. It can take large units of models that keep on coming back or are really hard to put down. Things like skeleton warriors and zombies just can be really frustrating to deal with, and zombies especially are a fantastic unit at the moment. We can add to this as well that they've also got great characters, a lot of them totting on a 3-up save, which means you can get those all-important 2-up save models with a good all-out defense or a Mystic Shield or anything like that, Finest Hour, etc. You can just really make them hard to deal with. A 6-up ward across the army as well, thanks to their heroes, due to the Deathless Minion rules, just gives them that little bit more attrition play as well, enabling them to get on objectives, just stay there and just hold against all odds and just against whatever your opponent throws at them. And so, number 1 in our not performing too well category, we have the Flesh Eater Courts. Now, there's a few things. First of all, Flesh Eater Courts just lack options. When the meta changes and their book sort of goes out of fashion, the fact they don't have many options, or they have a lot of very similar options, really hurts them, because it means they can't sort of adapt to a changing meta. If they suffer a few too many hits, they just don't adapt, because their book no longer works in the way it's meant to function, because it is sort of one-dimensional. That being said, they do have some play. I mean, as said, every army's got some 4 and 1s regardless of what faction you're playing, and also they actually went 5-0 recently as well at one of the events. Now, they've also lost a bunch of abilities. The thing where they can only pile in an attack twice now in any single combat phase. Used to be able to do it 3 times, fight again, and then fight on death, and then fight again as well. And just some of the things they've lost throughout this, the ability to stack command abilities on the same model and stack buffs to get extras to hit, and the ability to take multiple of the same mount tray and all that sort of stuff. It just compounds. They've just lost an awful lot over the course of the edition change. It's not particularly been kind to them, but you know, they are definitely an army that can still win games, just through sheer brute force. If your opponent isn't careful when you're playing against some Flesh Eater Courts, they will just go in and absolutely smash, just like they always have. Number 2, Ossiarch Bonereapers. Now, I'm going to say that I think the army has recently got the fix they need in the FAQ to really see them start to creep up, maybe towards that middle. Maybe they'll never be top tier like they maybe once were when Petrifex Elite was all the rage, but they definitely will, I think, see themselves creep up the rankings in the armies. So the big thing that hurt Ossiarch Bonereapers was how command point changes sort of affected them. It wasn't really clear how it all worked with Relentless Discipline and all of that, and I think more than anything, people just stopped playing them. They do fall down in this category just through lack of play more than anything, I think, and how the edition sort of changed and affected them. But unlike the other armies in this, maybe they are definitely on the rise, as they've got the easy fix in the newest FAQ, just explaining how the command point changes work and all the stuff so they can really get the most out of it. I do think we're going to see this army in particular on the rise very soon. Next up, we have the Gloomspite Gitz. Now, a couple of things I've heard. You've probably seen Gloomspite Gitz on the channel a little bit, and they kind of work when you do the right sort of thing, but they are definitely a hard army to get some wins with at the moment. Trollocs are looking pretty sweet, though. The fact you can run models of 6 units, and also because they've got that 2-inch reach, you know, they're all going to get to attack. That's pretty sweet. But a big thing that's hurt Gloomspite Gitz is the change to how we can stack buffs and debuffs. Gloomspite Gitz used to put a ton of minuses to hit out, and this used to be a big strategy of theirs, stacking debuffs on their opponents, and now that they can't, they're struggling to sort of withstand the hits from their opponents, even at middling-sized sort of power forces. Another big thing is they lack strong heroes or true hammers within the army. You've got things like the Mangler Squigs and Troggoths in there, but none of them really do an awful lot of damage. Even, you know, the strongest of those doesn't quite put out or doesn't survive long enough. It's just this change and how the game has just fundamentally changed and works that they're really struggling to sort of deal with either, one, keeping their units on the table because they have lost all those stacking debuffs, or take enemy units off the table because they've lost a bit of the hitting power on their units or the ability to put minuses on the opponent to bring that war of attrition in their favour. Number 4, Nighthaunt. Nighthaunt are struggling for a few reasons. So first of all, they lack any strong heroes or monsters at all. Although recently they have just got one monster edition, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's not the greatest monster in the world, the Mourngul from Forge World. You can look this up in the Monstrous Arcanum and find the rules for it there. But they do lack the strong heroes or monsters. They really don't have any that are either survivable or deal a lot of damage, so they lack that. They've also can't take advantage of save stacking in the current meta. Nighthaunt are that army, while they don't sort of care about rend all that much, they also can't take advantage and have just those super survivable heroes. Normally, to get that, you would probably put some extra wards on them, but now you can't stack wards either. This just hurts them again. And no true hammers. There are so many armies in the game that would put models on the table, things like Sons of Behemat, that require you to be able to deal a certain amount of damage in the game, that if you can't, you just simply straight up lose. And Nighthaunt definitely have that issue, where they don't do enough damage. However, I will say there are some cool tricks with Nighthaunt. I think a really cool rule they have is the fact where they can attack in the charge phase. If you can try and get these charges off, it can be really cool because your opponent can't use all that defense. This may be a good way to play things that help you sort of get them into the combat and get a chance to reroll those charges and get those 9s and attack in the charge phase can be really cool for the army. And so, lastly, for our ones not doing particularly well in the meta at the moment, we have Beasts of Chaos. Beasts of Chaos have widely, for a time, been regarded as maybe the worst army in the game, and it's probably a little bit true. I love playing my Beasts of Chaos, I absolutely do, but it is definitely a bit of a struggle playing them at the moment. There are some ways you can play with them, and definitely in more competitive sense, you can really play the sort of movement and board control game with the Beasts of Chaos, but it does sort of take a good sort of understanding of how the game works at that point to really get the best out of them. And for an average sort of player, it is going to be really hard to get the best out of beasts. They generally have quite weak war scrolls in general, none of them are too particularly flash hot, and they do have very little staying power, with many units just easily taken off the table. While beasts, you might think, have a ton of monsters, and that's cool for the new edition, a lot of them really aren't that tough and just fall over and end up giving away more victory points than they sort of get you. You've also got generally inadequate hammers, much like it just sort of follows on the weak war scroll thing. They've got some hammers in the army that just don't do enough damage anymore. Maybe one time they did, but beasts definitely don't anymore. And I mean, hopefully they are the next battle tome, as rumoured to be the Chaos battle tome, and that would be really sweet, because I don't think there's any army in need of a battle tome more than Beasts of Chaos. I don't care if other armies are split across 3 or 4 books, beasts need that new battle tome to really bring them in line and bring them into the new Age of Sigmar game. Well, thank you for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, if you'd like to come chat more with me and other members of our fine community here at Sinful Gaming, you can do so by coming and joining our Discord, of which there is a link in the description of the video to go and join. Also, if you'd like to help support the channel in another way, you can do so either by Patreon, YouTube members, or by going and purchasing some merch on our Teespring store. You can find the links to all 3 in the description of the video, once again, to Patreon, YouTube members, and to our merch store on Teespring. But also, we'd like to give a special shout out to everyone who helps support the channel via Patreon and YouTube members. So thank you to our patrons Christian Weir, James, Soren, Chaos Spawn, AJC, Kenny Lowell, Outer and Shot First, Andrew Bowen, Nathan Fee, Tim Newman, The Rising Ape, Cure Dynamic, Agu, Anthony B, MJ, and Dynat226. And a special thank you as well to our YouTube members Green Roots Gaming, Kenton Young, Steve T, The Real Zeop, Chris Wallace, Turai12, Vinny, Lock Lorick, Matt Mollin, Becca Kinski Groupie, The Johnny84, and El Mapache. Thank you as well, a special thanks especially to Lady Witchfox Art, who does all the amazing artwork for the channel. An absolute legend of a person. And then thank you as well to the legend that is Xmorphic. He does so much amazing work in the background of our Discord server, making sure everything works and looks nice and pretty there for us all to enjoy. So that's enough said from me though. Thank you all for watching. Once again, stay safe everyone, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the Grey. Ciao for now.